artists at it, and there's a whole infrastructure in place for doing things at scale, which is kind of exciting as a creator because you can see the things that you do really take shape quickly. When you're part of a really small team, and there's like 4 or 5 of us at a time, man, you're doing it all. Like I'm writing shares, and I'm doing game art, and I'm doing design. And if I'm not doing anything, well, then nobody is doing anything. So the whole thing is much more kind of hands-on. I mean, you hold the control, which is a nice answer to any producers or anybody who's pulling your purse strings. But you also have no expectation. Whatever you do is what you're going to do. Is it integrating or something? Just control it. Oh, it's both. I mean, there's times when you really want to just be able to scale. Just have people here's design for a bunch of chassis for ships. And have just all these built. Here's designs for a whole bunch of different life support systems and a whole bunch of different blasters. Let's just build all these. And so that's something that I miss. But on the other side, you get to make it exactly what you want to make it like. So there's a lot of artistic control that comes with that.
You feel more control and there's more self-expression going on in Atomic Space Command than most or all of the projects at Maxis.
I was lucky at Maxis on games like Spore and SimCity and The Sims. I had a lot of creative authorship. So I think those were unusually good situations for a sort of creative designer to participate in. So not necessarily. The large scale vision of those games was obviously way more collaborative than just sort of be another guy trying to figure out what we're doing. But in the domain, the stuff that we're working on, for SimCity, the buildings looked pretty much like I wanted them to look, or in Spore, the sort of the creature parts and the creature designs were kind of what I wanted them to be. So I can't really complain about not having creative authorship in those, because it was a pretty good deal.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I'm glad you guys are hitting what seems like a good market for Steam, which is kind of nitty-gritty space, ship design, combat stuff. But did you ever consider, because it must have crossed your mind, doing something that was a Kickstarter, something in the vein of The Sims? I mean, you have such an amazing pedigree, to not rally up support for that is interesting.
Yeah, it seemed like it was better to try and do something new, not just sort of ride on the pedigree of previous accomplishments.
That makes you very unique in the game industry.
Yeah. Well, it's you only have one go around, right? So you might as well try and do exciting things every time you have a chance. And I know I was just not that excited about trying to do SimCity or The Sims. I wanted to sort of make something new, take a whole bunch of new ingredients and combine them in a way. Which is to say, I'll never sort of bother world, building bubble worlds, really exciting stuff for me. I really like it a lot. So that's stuff that I might get back into at some point, but it's toy solar systems and chip mounts in those solar systems.
That's nice. You're an artist, don't you? That's what you do, is make new stuff.
Exactly.
Do you want to just go back in time and talk about what it was like when you first walked into Maxis, what year it was, what the student vibe was like?
Sure. So I joined Maxis in '95, and so SimCity 2000 had shipped. And in fact, I got to know quite a lot of people working at Maxis because I was working for Chroma Publishing, which was a company that did hit guide books back in the '90s. And so I worked on the hit guide book for SimCity 2000, and I really got into SimCity a lot. I played a lot of SimCity 2000, and I realized after a while that there was a whole new, really cool thing that these guys were doing, and that it would be much more fun to actually work on making those things than it would be to sort of write hit guides about them and make hit books about them.
That's a fascinating place to start, because you just know their design philosophy inside and out, and you can break it all down.
You really have to understand it pretty well to write the books on it. So I started there, and they put me to work on. I'd been doing 3D stuff, and back in the 90s, this makes it sound like a really old person. Back in the 90s, that was kind of exotic. People were using deep paint to do most of the art. It was still largely sprite-based game world, and I'd always been kind of a techie sort of artist, and so I got my hands on really early 3D programs like Sculpt 3D and Swivel 3D, 3D Studio, Release 2, Release 3, and so I built up a portfolio of really interesting. I mean, now it would be laughable, but for the time it was really impressive 3D stuff, and I was able to take it to Maxis and say, hey, you guys are eventually going to want to move to 3D, and I already know how to do all this stuff, and so they gave me a job, like pretty much, 24-year-old. I mean, it was kind of a kid, and they've worked on a lot of games that you've never heard of. Done this game called Full Tilt Pinball, which Maxis published, that we did, like it was in Windows 95, developed for a while.
Okay.
So,
wait, is it the space theme one?
yeah, it's the Space Neat one.
Okay, totally got it. Yep.
Yeah, that's a long time. And then Will had me. I mean, I worked on the Sega Saturn board of SimCity 2000, and then new games like Streets of SimCity and SimCopter. And so at the time, everybody was still kind of buzzed off of the success of SimCity 2000. And we were trying to figure out all the other things that you could do with it. And then I worked on SimCity 3000, which was going to be the major kind of reboot of SimCity after SimCity 2000, but that project was really confused. People wanted to make it a fully sort of 3D world that you could explore at ground level, but this was before 3D cards were a thing, and the machines were nowhere near capable of doing that. It was a decade or maybe even 20 years ahead of its time to do the fidelity that we wanted to do.
But what about like a SimCopter then? I mean, you could get on the ground and explore that in 3D environment.
Yes, but SimCopter wasn't really a city simulation. In SimCopter you took your city that you built out of that you built by playing SimCity 2000, and you flew around in it as a static environment. So we put pedestrians and cars and stuff like that. SimCopter is famous, of course, for the Easter egg. I don't know if you know.
I wanted to hear that story. Yeah, can you please tell the listeners what this Easter egg is all about?
Right. So we had a programmer, Jacques, who actually has since gone on to be pretty famous. He started a group called the Yes Men, but that's a different story. So he was a programmer, and he thought it would be pretty funny if on his birthday, when you successfully landed your helicopter after having done all these missions, there's a brass band, a brass band that welcomes you when the mayor gives a speech and stuff like that. And it was kind of like a victory celebration. So he thought that on his birthday there'd be a slim chance that instead of seeing kind of like the brass band dressed all in police clothes, they'd all that it would just be sort of male dancers with flashing nipples.
It's basically just like Party Boy from Jackass, just like filling this crew in 3D city with boys.
And man, the graphics it was really crude, and the people looked like they were made of pipe cleaners. I don't want to give you the impression this is all photorealistic. So yeah, you had kind of a party boy scene when you landed, and there was sort of there with slashing nipples, and so but Jacques wasn't a great programmer, so his graphics number generator, instead of basically making the show once every 10,000 hours, like would make it show up every 8 hours, something like that.
Well, I'm glad that it's so well known for this bizarre Easter egg and whatnot. But I loved SimCopter back in the day. I think it gets enough credit as being, I don't know, consider it the pioneer in kind of the open world genre.
It was a first experiment in that. I mean, calling the pioneer maybe overstates it, but it was a stab in that direction. We wanted to make a world like this sort of SimCity scale world that you could fly around and do stuff in. And the computers at the time were not really. I mean, it was a stretch. Like this was after we released SimCopter, like the first generation of computers came out, and they still pretty terrible, but they realized how much better they were than with just doing everything in software and doing straight up software rendering. And so that was like, wow, you could actually make these textures smooth and not crawly and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's so fun because I have such great memories of that game, and of course just trying to get like the attack helicopter and all that stuff. And then I go back and look at it. That protagonist is one of the most charmingly Atomic Space Command size.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Okay.
size, small little groups.
God, what was the most challenging part about developing it?
Well, all the 3D stuff had to be handwritten, right? I mean, this is sort of before you had 3D engines that you could buy off the shelf that have hardware acceleration, that have sort of texture pipelines and all that. So it all had to be hand rolled. Like, that's one of the things kind of interesting comparing it to Atomic Space Command and modern projects. Like, now it's so easy. You just get Unity or get Unreal and it's off the shelf and it all kind of works. And the 3D modeling tools are really sophisticated. You got plenty of artists that know how to use them. And so it's pretty straightforward to slam together something that's impressive. But back in the day, with Simcopter and Streets of SimCity, which was another one that was kind of using that same engine, man, we just had to do it all from scratch. Everything had to be written in pretty low-level code. You had to shave every polygon off. I mean, we wound up making those helicopters out of, like there are 200 polygon helicopters. So everything has this sort of folded origami quality to it. So trying to get anything that was not, just awful in those polygons with performance was really hard. Yeah, we live in a golden age now by comparison. Looking back at it, of course, it was all super exciting at the time because it wasn't sprites. It was like this fully 3D. Look, you could change the camera, and that was a big deal.
Are you nostalgic about those days? Do you ever go back and try and play the game on an old computer or YouTube videos or anything?
I do every now and then, and I'm kind of appalled how terrible they look. Because in my memory, they kind of look like they were sort of exciting and novel. They have a lot of the wonder of that early experimental day. But now you compare it to any modern game, it's stunning. And man, it looks like it was whittled. Wood.
Well, I mean, it is really impressive. I remember it blowing my mind back in the day, thinking that you could import your cities from SimCity 2000 into Streets of SimCity and Simcopter, because I remember my friends had SimCity 2000, and then we'd share these copies and try and interconnect those worlds. It was mind blowing.
Yeah, that was pretty magical. Like that was something people would want to do from SimCity 2000 on. You make your city, and now you want to see what it's like to be down in the city, to get down, at street level and look around and see the life of the city. So yeah, Streets of SimCity and Simcopter were the first ones to try and give you some approximation of that. The worlds just weren't alive enough or robust enough or rich enough down at ground level to really pay off on that. So it was good as long for Simcopter, for example. It was good as long as you were sort of flying around skyscraper level, but as soon as you got down to ground level, not so much.
Don't log the horde! Look away, Marion! Well, let's focus on ground level then stuff with Sims. That's coming up a couple years later. I mean, we've heard the stories and the legends about how that game started. Did it feel monumental during development? Did you feel like this was something new?
Oh, no, it felt like it was another one of... I mean, the weird thing about working with Wright is that you never know... I mean, all of his ideas sound terrible, and you never know, if they're terrible brilliant, or if they're terrible terrible. The Sims was one of those ones that was like, this was just really stupid. Like, the game was just not who wants to play this? And it was really nothing for a long time, and then all of a sudden, it flipped and became magical, and it was... I have to give Will a lot of credit for that, because he was pretty much pushing the thing himself in the face of a lot of skepticism from kind of the larger Maxis studio and from other people on the team. And it wasn't until he pushed it pretty far that people went, and even then we brought it to E3, and we didn't have a big booth. I mean, we were sort of nestled into the larger EA booth with a handful of monitors. Like, it was not a big, it wasn't a big splash, and it kind of stole the show, even though the slides were small, and there were just a handful of monitors, but it was just this weird, fresh thing that came in.
Was it?
But no, it was not obvious that it was going to be. We thought that it would sell a few 100,000 copies, and people would dig it, and it would be another interesting little build project. The fact that it kind of ate the world was a surprise to us.
How much of that do you think was it expanding so well into a wider audience? Like, I think a majority of Sims fans that I know are women. Was that something
in retrospect? Yeah, but it had to initially appeal to your kind of core game market. Like, when the game first came out, if core gamers didn't find So, like, you couldn't just, at the time, you couldn't just reach that market directly. You had to actually have a game that had some strategy and had some hardcore game mechanics against it, so that, so the guys would play it, they played it for a week or two, they get kind of bored with it, and then their little sister would pick it up, or their girlfriend would pick it up. But yeah, no question, in retrospect, it was appealing to people who never really play games otherwise.
Was it, when it clicked over into reviewing, like, this is working well, was it when things were a little bit more gamified? To use that dumb term?
It was a bunch of things. The environments got richer. There was game progression, and you kind of knew what you wanted to do at the next stage. You as a player said, well, I want to try and get this couch, or I want to try and get a promotion. So there were game things to do. Enough of the sort of simulation came into place that you could start projecting all the Sims, like emotional relationships between the Sims. And then there was stuff that I worked on was mostly like the build mode and the neighborhood stuff. So I can't actually take any credit at all for the core of the Sims. The stuff that I worked on was like, okay, let's figure out how we're going to make walls and porches and roofs and how the neighborhood is all going to work as a place.
Please tell me when you were developing that and coding it that you at least had a peaceful piano soundtrack that was eventually the game to help you be motivated going through.
Yeah, the audio design for Maxis games was pretty consistent for a long time. Like, there was a kind of a Maxis style, like for SimCity 4, we went kind of a lot of sort of Gershwin, kind of 1940s, 1950s American music sounds, and it wasn't at all your kind of 8 Mile soundtrack, as I mentioned before, kind of, well, this is nice, I want to be here, kind of thing.
It's amazing. Like, I ran into Chris Tilton at E3 last year, and he was the composer for SimCity 2013, which was by a mile my favorite soundtrack of that year.
Yeah, it was a really good soundtrack, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. And he was talking about how he had so much feedback from other programmers saying that when they were programming other game developers, they would always listen to SimCity 2013 soundtrack because it has like this inspirational driving tone that's so
Well,
rare.
there's something kind of interesting about this. There's 2013 where the simulation actually had was on a clock. So we had a frequency that the simulation tuned forward at. And I forget what it was, but just for the sake of argument, let's say that was 4 times per second, for example. And so I realized that there's this kind of like a beat to the whole city. The simulation's going to tick at this frequency. That means that like lights are going to turn off and on at that frequency. That means like the street lights are going to turn at that frequency. It means that like basically the whole world operates at that. And so I asked Chris to put music onto that beat, so that basically there'd be this sort of drive music that would line up with the drive simulation. So if you look at it, you've made it so that the Sims, the walking footprints of the Sims are on the beat. So there's this whole consistent drive to the city. And our music designer, we had our lead audio designer for SimCity, studied Ken Jolly. He was like, I have to pay this beat back in times, or it will drive people mad. It'll just be so obnoxious. I'm like, no, it must be on all the time.
It must be one big music video.
I even made it so that the poofs of smoke coming out of smokestacks were on the beat. But then Ken actually succeeded. Like, okay, there's just gonna be times when the beat goes away, and there's just gonna be washes of sound.
It can't be Steamboat Willie for 100 hours.
Exactly. And I have some
Sure.
I thought it was neat to keep it all metronomic, but
So, jumping back to Sims working on neighborhood stuff, how influential were you in designing Mortimer Goth and that weirdo's house?
Not at all. I just did the systems, so I worked out like, okay, here's how floors work, or here's how swimming pools work, and these are sort of tile sets, and these are draw operations, and here's how you snapshot the lot and embed it into a larger landscape and stuff like that. So I was kind of an art systems guy, and the sort of the character design, the character activity, the sort of the narrative life of the Sims, that was all like Chris Trickier, Connor Ryan. I mean, there were a whole bunch of designers that were
searching on the internet with new codes for The Sims. I take it you must have talked about it a lot, right?
So it was one of those things that you just sort of like. I'd say I was more surprised by when we didn't score. And we thought, you could make some jiggly stuff and score, sure, if you wanted to, but that's no big deal. And then it turned out to be the thing. And everybody remembers that we score. These crazy penis monsters. And so new codes on The Sims were like, oh yeah, whatever, people, that's kind of stuff that we've used before. But man, I was blown away by the repulsive creativity of our fan base. When it came to score, the first week that it came out, we all just sort of watched the new creatures before making them come in, because we had like that network inside of it, so hit refresh, and there'd be another 1,000 creatures, on the in the encyclopedia, and we're like, oh my god, can you believe this? And of course, we officially, as EA, we had to frown on it and delete it and stuff like that, but as developers, we're like, you guys are awesome.
Just porn planets, welcome to Sex World.
And we did all this procedural animation stuff for Spore 2, so the creatures would dance around. We had all the soft body dynamics. And soft body dynamics, we thought, it's over tails wiggling and stuff like that. And it did make me like,
Jesus Christ. We'll have to keep on this furry theme, but let's keep it rolling. How involved were you guys with Sims Online and what that eventually became?
So again, for me, I was just doing the kind of the art system mechanics. How you piece together buildings into larger environments. I helped Will out with some of the social graph stuff. Like we did a bunch of visualizations for social graph stuff, but by and large, on the art side and on the art system side, Sims Online just borrowed stuff that we'd already figured out from The Sims. So there wasn't that much for me to do other than help Will out with some design visualizations.
My mile-high perspective, I never played Sims Online, I'm sorry. I wish I did, but my mile-high perspective was that it wasn't long before it all just turned into some creepy sex chat room. Is that what happened to that? What's going on?
At that point, I had already switched over to work. I guess I already started working on SimCity 4.
Okay.
So I was like, yeah, doing that stuff over on that side of the building, and I don't actually know that much about it. I kind of get the sense that that's, like, if you look at Second Life, for example, that's just the natural end state of online communities. That's the base that they all fall into.
Yeah, I think all games, like The Witness, just turned into some just sex dungeon now. You can't stop it. But let's talk about, like, the Maxis aesthetic. When do you feel like that came online? And is it an oversimplification just to be like, oh, kind of pastel, peaceful, clean colors?
No, there is definitely Maxis aesthetic, and it kind of came from Will's sensibility. Like it was there in SimCity 2000, and then we developed it and pushed it further with The Sims, and SimCity 4, and SimCity 3000, and The Sims 2, and onto Sword, and it was just a shared sensibility among people that made the games there. Like we were sort of self-consciously making games that weren't kind of your roid-raged Space Marine kind of thing. There were games that were much more software toys than they were traditional games. In fact, I don't know if you know what the Maxis level looks like, but there's kind of like a crescent moon kind of thing. That was actually supposed to be a ball that to give you the sense of it's a toy. It's like a ball that you bounce. You can do a million things with a ball. So I think that sensibility comes from just the sensibility of people making what we wanted to be, engaging, charming, delightful toys that had games, that had game mechanics for having them, but at heart were toys, were things that you could play with. And there were also games that were all object-based. So, you had libraries of components, and you put them down and interact with them and rearrange them in a multitude of different ways. So if you think of like buildings in SimCity, there's thousands of buildings, and you have tools for putting them down and picking them up and manipulating them. Or you think of all the furniture in The Sims, or all the creature parts and support. So there's a certain
are space marine garbage.
Yeah, we were doing stuff that we could tell our parents about. You know,
Maybe not Sims Online. Other than that, check it out, folks.
there you go. But yeah, we were doing games that had kind of a wit and sophistication to them. I mean, obviously now sort of the game space is so huge, and there's people making all sorts of games from incredibly sophisticated to incredibly crude, and so far that's great. But at the time, when the game industry was much smaller, and we staked out a sort of style and sensibility, and it was just who we were. I don't even proud of it or not proud of it. This was just the sort of thing that we did.
Yeah. It's interesting. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but speaking to other people who worked at Maxis before, they always talk about, Lowride being heralded as a genius. But it's like, it was important to point out, though, there's a real batting average situation. Like, Maxis cranked out more games than anybody really remembers. And the ones that hit huge, but there are so many experiments out there. Do you want to talk about that nature a little bit?
Well, that's kind of what I was saying earlier. But the thing with Will is that all of his ideas sound terrible. Like initially they sound terrible. You're like a game where you're managing a planet, its ecosystems. It's a terrible idea. Even SimCity, he had a hard time getting. I mean, this is before my time. He had a hard time getting going because there was no game there. It was just a toy city. But the thing that was remarkable was that you couldn't really tell if they really were terrible until well into the project, and games like SimCity and The Sims turned into sort of cultural touchstones, and then games like Spore, for example, were kind of a swinging abyss, but had elements of that magic to them. They didn't ever quite come together and become sort of coherent, beautiful objects like SimCity and The Sims did, but they had elements of magic in them. And then there's ones, that like SimAd is kind of interesting. Yeah, they got to play with it for a bit. SimEarth, kind of interesting. SimCopter, kind of interesting. And that's the thing with Will and with Maxis was, at least for a chunk of them, they were experimental. They were trying to find something, trying to strike out into new territory and find some new stuff to do. And you don't always, when you're just going by the formula, you don't always know what to find. And so sometimes you think, well, this seems terrible, and it is terrible. But sometimes you come over the hill and there's sort of, El Dorado there.
So I think people familiar with Lowride will just think that, I imagine every time he speaks, it's like one of his GDC talks where your mind's going to be blown. There's so many brilliant theories out there. I'm curious, what's it like to actually work with him?
I've worked with him for so long that it's hard to answer that question in a single, some projects he's really engaged in his prototype stuff with you and is really on, and other projects he's still he shows up and he kind of swirls around and then leaves, so it sort of just depends on the project. But that said, he's kind of a crazy genius. He's one of the smartest people I've ever worked with, and draws connections between things, finds inspiration for games and things that you wouldn't think are promising ground for inspiration at all.
Yeah, I remember something that always stuck with me is in one of his talks somewhere, he was talking about game design versus physics. I'm sure it was associated with Spore, and he made the comparison saying that physics is taking the infinite possibilities of the universe and boiling it down to a certain code or a certain set of numbers and equations, so to speak. And then game design is the exact opposite of that.
Right. Yeah. So we talked about this a bunch. You could look at physics as essentially a compression algorithm. You have this super complicated world out here. Rain falling, planets in orbit, and stuff like that. You want to express that in the most succinct formula possible, right? So it's a massive data compression. And then with game design and world creation, you want to create a system that expands to give you a world to interact with. And with game design, especially kind of between it as well, a big chunk of it is giving the player a system that's rich enough that they can then use their own imaginations with. So it wasn't trying to designers and architecture engineers that started jumping on boards for the stories that they wanted to tell. So it's yeah, all the successful ones succeeded in different ways at doing that. I'd say.
Well, Spore specifically, I'm curious. People are bringing it up a lot again in reference to No Man's Sky.
Right.
Are you following No Man's Sky? Do you have any thoughts on the comparison between those two games?
I think this is a. So I think the engineering and mapping and the world creation in No Man's Sky kind of blows the doors off of our procedural creation. I mean, not to be too blunt about it, but I've been just really impressed with the procedural planet creation and procedural distribution of flora and features on those planets. It's really, really good. Our stuff was, by contrast, sort of half baked. But the main thing that Spore brought to the table was sort of the player creativity. You know, like you had all these artists who created very sophisticated things. You know, sophisticated vehicles, sophisticated creatures, safe around. And so with Spore, ultimately the thing that it gives you was it amplified your creativity. You know, it let you start with something fairly simple and wind up with something that was kind of magical that you didn't know you could make. And No Man's Sky seems like it's a vastly better sort of universe creation, created universe, procedurally created universe, but it doesn't really have that player expressivity, you know, baked into it. So there's similar claims to scale and endless experience and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's definitely overlaps. I think the core things that the two different projects brought, one in the case of Spore was look at the amazing things you're able to make. And sorry, you can't actually do all that much with them, but look at the amazing things you get to make. And then in No Man's Sky, it's look at the amazing places you get to go and explore.
Yeah.
And there's somewhat different sort of philosophies behind it. Yeah, I've been really impressed with the art style and the sophistication of the worlds that they've been able to create procedurally.
Yeah, I actually, visiting Hello Games over there in England for a cover story a while back, I asked them the exact question about Spore comparisons. Of course, they were unbelievably humble, which is their MO over there, I think. But Sean Murray's like, oh, please, like, Spore is a brilliant piece of game design and procedural animation, and I really liked it. He's like, with the big book on video game procedural animation is written, procedural generation, he's like, I hope we have, like, a footnote in the chapter that's devoted to Spore. That's where they're coming from.
That's way too humble in this case. Like the way that they've solved the problems around like making infinite variety of creatures and infinite variety of planets is pretty impressive. Like as somebody who's kind of obviously was in the thick of it with Spore, I have a more than casual interest in the way that they did it, and I was impressed with the artistic control that they were able to get. In our case, we wound up having to sacrifice a whole lot of artistic control because we were giving the players the ability to do that, right? And in retrospect, we gave the players so much control, it was difficult for us to sort of make a challenging game experience around it, right? Because we said, hey, here you go, here's all these wonderful tools for creating things. But it was hard to reason about the things that were created after the fact and make kind of a tight, structured game experience. That's my hope that by maintaining more control, No Man's Sky's long-term play experience will be better as a result.
What was it like inside the company after Spore release? Because outside of the afterglow of hype, I played it and really had a great time with it. But I'm just curious, was EA knocking on the door every day and being like, sweet Jesus, we need to make our money back on this thing? Let's make Dark Spore, get it on the door.
We were after Spore. So we did some expansion packs. We made more richer hearts and stuff like that. And it made a chunk of money. I didn't pay that much attention at the time to that. It wasn't my responsibility for how much money to make. But they did okay. You know, it wasn't a financial disaster for them. The Maxis studio then kind of, oh, I guess we'll do something else now. You know, like,
Moving on.
exactly.
Do you want to talk a little bit about SimCity 2013's EA, and like what were EA's marching orders for SimCity, and how much of that came from Axis Within?
So the initial thing was we wanted to do another SimCity. There'd been a couple other sort of SimCity-ish societies that had been done by other studios in the interim, and we thought that the technology had finally gotten to the point where we could make a proper 3D SimCity. Because if you look at SimCity 4, it was isometric. I mean, we wound up building a 3D engine to render all the sprites, but the camera was locked. So even though there was 3D geometry there, you could never move the camera down to it. And so we thought that the technology had finally gotten to the point where we could make reasonable looking architecture and reasonable looking buildings. And so it came out of sort of desire to revisit SimCity as a world, right? As a place that you could kind of fly around and there's kind of so there were a bunch of sort of visuals that I wanted to see. I wanted to see sort of the model railroad landscapes of my childhood. Stuff building in my grandmother's basement. Brought to life in a really sophisticated way.
It was a tilt shift look part of that.
Yeah, that was the tilt shift look and the it's maybe the largest ride, but there's sort of an exaggeration and a amplification of a bunch of features in SimCity. Like the buildings were sort of compressed and expanded in different ways, so that like the doors and the windows would be more prominent. So we tried to take everything to make it sort of really interesting. So everything was interesting to look at, and everything was kind of exciting to look at. So we initially, a bunch of us at Maxis said, let's try and put together a sort of rough prototype and a pitch for how this could work. And after a while, he said, okay, you guys can do that. The considerations were that they wanted to make it, EA wanted to make it more of a platform, an ongoing platform that they sort of build and develop on. And so that mandated the kind of the server and online stuff, which in retrospect obviously was a fatal flaw.
Were you personally excited about that stuff, or was it just like, well, yes, we have to?
So it was something that we had to do. And the problem was how do we make it so that it actually reflects reality, right? Like if you say, well, this is the way the system constraints us to solve for, then how do we solve it in a way that makes the game interesting, as opposed to just discouraging it. And so that was well, there's all kinds of different stuff we can do. Cities in the context of cities in the context of the larger environment, like where your water comes from, where your labor force comes from, where developers go, what's does crime in a neighboring city affect your city? If you want to have a garden city and you have a neighboring city that's generating lots of power, can you shut that city people for yourself? So there are interesting sort of design space possibilities that are opened up by the requirement for it to always be online. But obviously it would be nicer if those were optional. Yeah, these are all things that online you can do, but if you don't
Is the push from EA for that stuff just so that players are one step closer to microtransactions, or what's the idea there for pushing so much for online?
I think at the time it was sort of EA saw this as the future. Like this is just how things are going to be. Like they'll have always online, always connected game world, and let's use SimCity to push into that glorious vision of the future. So microtransactions selling content in the App Store was part of it, but it was more to sort of make it sort of living online world out of the whole thing that will just always be there. The tech that we didn't have that infrastructure to actually build it up, obviously. It was the meltdown that we actually had, a million people pile in was just appalling, at the time.
Yeah, what is it like to go to the office every day when the outside world is losing its mind trying to play this game?
Yeah, well, it was grim. We were pretty happy with the actual game part of the game, the way that it looked, the stuff that we could do. I mean, there was stuff that needed iteration and polishing. The game went out most of the ship is exploding.
And it's
So-
just like the tech department. It's just people. There's 1,000-yard stairs. They've been up for 3 days. Like, is that what
There's a
it's
bunch
like?
of that, yeah.
Okay. Jesus.
That I didn't, for the most part, personally have to engage that much with that because it was like I'm not a back-end server engineer and don't kind of have to deal with allocating all these server resources and figuring out where the bottlenecks are and stuff like that. So it felt like, what's going on, guys? Like, can we let players in now?
Can people like our game yet?
And yeah, so that was pretty hard as a designer, having built something that was, I thought, pretty wonderful, pretty magical, and then no, you can't play it. No, it's not for you.
I really love SimCity 2013. Like, I mean, obviously the size of the cities was an issue, but I mean, for like those 5 or so hours where you're building up to that limit, I thought obviously the art, the music, my God, the music, and just the way that it rolled out the systems to you was so clean and so wonderful.
Yeah, I think a lot of things were part of that project. If the sort of roll-up hadn't been so calamitous, then it would have been straightforward enough to build up larger cities, for example. And the eventual vision was that the region, the whole vast, 32 kilometer by 32 kilometer region, would be one potential city you can build anywhere. Like the whole thing was going to be there's just a landscape, and you can build a city over here, and then school over here, and then a city over there, and then connect them together.
And that was the plan post-launch, or that was the plan?
Sorry, before we launched, my design intent there was to expand the cities until they eventually abutted each other, and then you just have a huge connected landscape to build in. But after launch, it was like, well, maybe not.
So it's the tech just couldn't live up to the dreams.
Yeah, backends. Basically, it was the backend server stuff, like the simulation engine with more powerful computers and more memory would have let us scale eventually to larger and larger cities until eventually the whole region could be one vast city. And that was sort of the initial design intent behind it, but that never to be.
No. Was that the toughest part of your career, do you think?
I'd say that was pretty much the hardest part of my career. Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is a sensitive topic, but was the rise of City Skylines' popularity then the next year, was that a silver lining? Just that, this
Yeah,
game
that was
is
pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah, keep in mind that I don't own SimCity, right?
Right.
SimCity belongs to EA, and so we threw all this stuff out there, put all this stuff out there for people, and the fact that City Skylines was able to take a whole bunch of the ideas and keep them alive, put them into a new product and get them in front of people is, great. I have to admit, looking at some of the data view stuff, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of familiar. Like they took some of it just straight up, but they're welcome to it. As far as I'm concerned, the ideas, you don't own ideas, right? Like you basically make something and you put it out there, and then people pick it up, and if they like it, they do more stuff with it themselves. And I'm all for that.
Did you play a fair amount of City Skylines?
I played a bunch. I think the gameplay was nice and smooth. The art polish didn't quite do it for me.
Okay.
I'm somebody who's particularly obsessed about the way things look and the sort of the relationship between the simulation and the visuals.
Yeah.
And the City Skyline stuff didn't quite pull that off for me in the way that I kind of wanted. But that said, it's a good game, and I'm happy that they're keeping the torch alive. It's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's gotta be nice. I mean, that game has been really successful. And I'm curious what you think about kind of the other side of the sim genre, which seems like it's free-to-play iOS stuff. I think SimCity and iOS is doing really well. What do you think about that scene?
I don't actually. I'm old school enough that I'm more of a PC gamer, so I don't actually pay that much attention to the free-to-play stuff. I kind of like big old elaborate simulation games that I can play on my computer with lots of memory.
Yeah.
And so I noodle around with The Sims free-to-play
esque renaissance for something like The Sims. It seems like the market's right for that.
We've always, at Maxis, we were always expecting somebody to come up with a reasonable Sims competitor. You know, like I mean, there's very few genres where you've only got one game.
Yeah.
You know, as the that is the genre. But part of it, I think, is that game development. Like The Sims is really about kind of domesticity and people's ordinary lives. And I mean, obviously, turned it up to 11, you know, but it's not about orcs and space marines and explosions and stuff like that so much as it is about kind of domestic triumphs and failures and stuff like that. And I think maybe a lot of game developers just aren't interested in that. Because part of it is like people just don't want to do that. You know, they want to make games that are more escapist power fantasies or so. This is just speculation on my part. I don't actually know why there haven't been any sort of like full-on AAA competitors to The Sims or full-on like no offense to Skylines, but why there haven't been any like, you know, 10 million, 20 million, $30 million budgeted competitors to SimCity beats me. You know, like I will say that those games, those systems-based games, are hard. That they take a real different mindset than games that are more level-based, where you have a character and you can sort of build a level and then kind of run down the level.
And so much talent in the industry is used to that developing mind frame. It's tough to shift out.
It's tough to if you haven't ever done systems-based games before, you know, games that are all about thousands of interlocking parts in a simulation that's driving them all, then and you mostly made levels and made kind of enemy AI that is mostly concerned with strafing and stuff like that, then it's a different mindset from skill set. So maybe that's it. You know, some combination of cultural sensibility and some combination of sort of production expertise that makes it hard.
Well, hey, do you want to give a heads up for when Atomic Space Command is?
Yeah, so we were just on PAX East show at the Atomic Space Command, and we've got we're still alpha, pre-alpha-ish. The game's not feature complete. We're letting people play it. I mean, if they go to atomicspacecomand.net, they can just download it and start playing it even now. But it's alpha software, pre-alpha software, so you know it's going to crash and it's going to be buggy and not feature complete. And I'd say we're still a couple of months away from having a more robust alpha with all the multiplayer stuff working properly. And then we're shooting for a beta, like a feature complete, and most of the bugs ironed out by the end of the year. So it's still a little ways out. But you can grab the build right now. You can build ships. You can snap in reactors and put motors in and put blasters in, and load crew members up, and then go play. And depending upon we put up new builds every week or two. So depending upon which build you get, you can either hop online with your friends or not, depending upon if it's broken in this week or not. We're not charging for it. I mean, just basically get it and play it and hop on our forums and give us feedback about what you like and what you don't.
It seems like a peaceful life you got going on.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah. Is it stress-free game development these days?
No, because when there's basically just a few of you and you're cranking to put a game out, and you're not making any money until the game actually does come out, it does motivate you to work until midnight.
Well, hey, for making money on the other side of things, do you have a plug for where people can look at your paintings, look at your work?
Sure. So people can go to my website, oceanquickly.com, or they can go to I've got a gallery that shows my work, Chloe Gallery, that just go to Chloe Gallery in San Francisco to see stuff. And if you're in San Francisco, you can see it in person. And then I've got a blog where I stick all kinds of stuff up, both like old stuff from Maxis and paintings and stuff from Atomic Space Command, and that's at oceanquickly.blogspot.com. So that's kind of from back in the day when Blogspot was a thing. But I've maintained it.
I've never commissioned artwork, but I'm tempted to get a painting from you and pay you big money for like the Simcopter protagonist. Beautiful style, just a giant canvas of that ugly guy.
That would be really funny.
It'd be your finest work. All right, but hey, Ocean, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you. It was a pleasure chatting with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Game Informer Show. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll have a new episode waiting for you. Bye, everybody. Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Game Informer Show. I'm your host, my name is Matt Birds.
How you doing?
Doing real good.
End of the month.
End of the month, man. It's been a full month of Dishonored 2 coverage. We've been rolling out features every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can go to GameInformer.com/Dishonored2 to see all that stuff. But at the tail end of every month, I'm sure people listening to this podcast know this format by now. We have a post, get a bunch of questions from the community, and in the best scenarios, ask the developers directly their burning questions. So on this episode, we have Harvey Smith, who is the creative director, co-creative director for Dishonored 2.
Director, yeah.
Co-creative director. There we go. He was also creative director, co-creative director on Dishonored 1. Also worked on Deus Ex and was on the QA department for like System Shock 2 back in the day. So also Deus Ex's sequel.
Yep.
Yeah, he's been around and he knows a lot. He's a very smart guy. So we're going to ask him a bunch of questions from the community. And here it is. Harvey Smith, welcome back to the Game Informer Show, sir.
Hey, thank you.
I look back and see you were on this podcast back in like August of 2011. So it's nice to have you back on, man.
Yeah, it's just so funny. I'm sitting here in France. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The river is this way. I'm in one of our conference rooms with stuff probably written on the board that we shouldn't show. There's Dishonored art. And I looked at my Instagram the other day. And I the first cover for the Dishonored when Victor and Raphael and I went out to your offices to talk to you. I did a really nice cover with Mark, Victor, and Sebastian Katana, our director. And I looked at that on my Instagram feed. For some reason, I was scrolling way down through it, and I realized, like, holy cow, that was 2011. It's amazing. And of course, the game wasn't done yet. Dishonored 1 shipped in 2012. October or something, I think. But anyway, it just seems like a long time. It's one project's worth of life cycle. And so I took another photo of the new Game Informer covers, the Corvo version and the Emily. I couldn't get to it. They were in a locked office here in our offices, so I took a picture through the window and I put those on my Instagram as well. And so just for symmetry, right, to have another in the stream.
Nice. So we've got a bunch of questions from the community. Some are pretty nitty-gritty, some are a little bit more broad, but we're going to start out with the more broad one.
Right.
Optimus just wants to know, what are the biggest issues you had with the first game in retrospect, and how are they being addressed in the sequel?
Well, you know, we listened to the players a lot, and they had like a number of points where they wanted to see something slightly different, even the people who really, really love the game. And so we had things like that we could tackle this project, or, you know, we tried to do everything bigger and better for Dishonored 2, but some people felt the end games were too binary, so we've gone after that as a way to enhance the experience. So now I'm super conscious of what's on the whiteboard. I didn't look at it before the meeting, so I'm angling myself toward the river for safer. We didn't necessarily feel the game was too short, and most players did not. But once in a while, we heard people kind of race through it, didn't play twice. They thought the game was too short, so we made this game a little longer. were people who really liked the non-lethal options, and they liked not killing and sneaking, and so they wanted. Some people felt like killing was oversupported. To give you an example, you could drop from heights without breaking the fall. You could assassinate the guns. So yeah, you could drop non-lethal takedown, basically, which is fun. And we had combat chokes, so during combat you could like hit someone in the throat, and while they're off balance, flip them around and choke them unconscious. So basically, there's a set of probably 5 or 6 things that if you troll the forums, you'll see people mention, like, hey, I love this game, but I wish blah, where we try to go after those things.
Nice. So the number one question by far, a lot of people ask this, there's a lot of Dot fans out there. They're wondering if he's going to have a major role in this game, or how you characterize his role in this Hunter 2.
Yeah, so Dowd, we say, was a character, a minor character in the first game, who was the one who assassinated the Empress, and then we decided to use him as an protagonist in the DLC. However, at the end of the DLC, Corvo, in certain circumstances, spares him, and we imply that Dowd takes the money he's built up over the years from killing corrupt aristocrats and the like, and he disappears, basically retires. And so, yeah, so there's nothing announced about Dowd at all.
Okay, gotcha. But you know that the fans really like him, right?
Yeah, we liked it too. Just inside baseball here, but I hate sports betting more. I don't know why I just said that. It's such a useful term, even though I don't like baseball. But anyway, is that because he added voice to the character from the DLC that made him more human? Is it because he was a villain, then you see a regretful side to, and that deepens him as a character? There's multiple answers, but it's really interesting. Why do people like Dowd? By the time we finish Dishonored, our artists and level designers really need the tools, and the game designers really knew our systems and what our world was. Our lore people really knew the world, and so naturally the DLC, the Reborn Witches and the Knife and Gunwall, they feel like a really hyper-polished version of Dishonored 1, in my opinion. Whenever I tell people, if you're on PC, go buy the Game of the Year version. If you're on console, go buy the Definitive Edition. It's not like, at this point, it's me pushing sales. The game's already financially successful by far. It's me saying, oh god, I really want more people to play our DLC, because we really enjoy making it, and we really like hearing from fans when they play it, but it does feel like okay, we went through this full round of development, which is like hide and seek the entire time for 3 years, right? And then you get to the end and you're like, aha, I know what this is. Now let's do it again, but in a shorter cycle and in a way that's just more gratifying. It feels very good.
DK wants to know if you'll be able to interact with the outsider besides just listening to him, like explaining ourselves, when he questions our choices, for example.
There's some stuff that I can't get into. I'll let them say it so no one's disappointed. We don't go full RPG with the outsider or anything like that. But we have an interesting interaction with him. More of his background, and some things I think that we're gonna announce in the coming months that I think people are gonna really like. He's a really polarizing character. It's interesting. Like the outsider's the kind of guy where you either love it or hate it.
Who hates him? Who are these people?
There are people that must say this, really found him intriguing and mysterious. This kind of like character that offers you the chance to
So part of making it more likable, but tying to the next question here, Sontab wants to know why you decided to change the voice actor for the Outsider. Because now it's voiced by the guy who's the Penguin on Gotham, right?
Yeah, first of all, Billy Lush did a great job the first time around, and Robin Lord Taylor does a great job this time around. And I think there are going to be people who prefer one or the other, but they're both, the main thing to remember is that they're both true to the character. We're very character driven. We didn't bring somebody else in and say, hey, give us a completely different take on the character. It's like, this is the character, this is what we want it to sound like. And usually, without going into the specific details of any actor, usually when you work with actors, their schedules are nuts, and our schedules are nuts. And when we're available and when we need the performance and how much time they have and how many times they need to come back in the future, because we did like, I don't remember how many recording sessions that we did for this project, but if you counted the throwaway sessions where we were just putting in placeholder voice, we did, 5 or 6 sessions, I guess, and we worked with the Blind Light out in Los Angeles. These guys are friends, they always do great work. But anyway, this often comes down to availability, schedule, logistics, and you do what you can, and you work with who you want to work with, and you can work with. And I'd be excited to hear the Billy Lush version of all of these lines, but at the same time, I'm also really excited about working with Robin Lord Taylor, whose performance as the Penguin on Gotham is fantastic. It's defining. I've never had the Penguin before, now I love the Penguin. So we're very lucky in that regard. It's the same is true with Emily. We worked with Chloe Grace Moretz before she played young Emily. As we told you guys when you were in France. And apparently translated Emily. And in both cases, it's like an embarrassment of riches. These incredibly talented people, and they're lending their voice to the game. It's great.
Yeah, for sure. So you touched on it a little bit earlier, but maybe you can kind of expand on it here. Serrana says, are there any more civilians just going about their business? I mean, I know we had the rat plague in Dunwall, there are blood flies now in Karnaka, but I still think it'd be cool to have more people roaming around the city. And then Nintendo Foos has a similar question where he just asks, how have interactions with non-combative characters evolved for Persona 2?
Yeah, so quick answer is yes, there are many more people out having their lunch, sitting at the edge of the roof, or fishing off the dock, or gambling in an alley. And generally, if there's in a public space, they're okay with being there. They might say a one-liner about their lives there, dukes, edicts, or the way they're treated by the guard or whatever. Sometimes they have color commentary on other parts of the empire. Hey, I'm with my family here poorly. When the great potato famine happened 15 years ago or whatever. There are lines like that. But if you're indoors and they see you, then of course they're hostile because you're not supposed to be there. You're trespassing. And if they see you fire or something, of course they sound the alarm. They run. So yes, if you're ghost like you play, you can just eavesdrop on people in many kind of slice of life moments.
Nice. Flash has something tied into that. He just wonders if they'll react to using their supernatural powers in front of them. Will they get freaked out by it?
Supernatural powers in our world are so rare that they're considered to be mythic. People are superstitious to the point where they walk around with carved whale bone in their pocket to, prevent pregnancy or to make sure the crops grow or whatever. But nobody's like casting fireballs. It's not the Harry Potter world or whatever. And so whenever you do anything like that, even around a garden strike or civilian issue or whatever, they say, what will just happen? They often freak out.
Wants to know, he says, otherwise, can we expect to learn more about Panacea or other parts of the world? Which is, we had a sort of cover story that showed, like, hey, there's this whole other continent, there's this giant unknown continent, or you even mentioned, like, maybe there's dinosaurs there, who can say? So I'm just wondering if Dishonored can flesh out that world a little bit more.
Well, I can promise you there are not dinosaurs on the Venusian continent. There's probably something much crazier than that. some other people. We really, I would say there's a lot of people over this time scattered here and there. It's the same. It's not like it's denser or longer, but it's just if you're looking for it, you can find a lot more detail about the rest of the empire and the history of the empire. You know, down to a detail that I won't talk about here. When we did the first game, we didn't have a dating system. We had a calendar. I think with 13 months or 28 days each, we did research on the calendar and we came up with all the months. We realized we had made a mistake, so we corrected it at some point. And one of the months was in the wrong place, you know, all this esoteric stuff. But we didn't put a year on it. We just kind of said, it's kind of like Europe around this time. Europe and parts of Eastern Europe around this time period. We didn't put a date on it. And when you work on a game with this much like history, you start to trip on yourself. And so for this game, we had to add a dating system. I think the new game takes place in 1852, and I think the original game takes place in 1837 or something. And that's interestingly enough, that's the time in London when Spring Hill Jack was said to be seen. This kind of guy in a demonic mask leaping over buildings, magically landing in the alley and stabbed. The year that Spring Hill Jack was allegedly sighted in our world was near the corner inspired by the outsider running around doing that sort of stuff. And so the new game technically is 1852 in our sort of analog calendar. In a way it's the same treatment with new information about the lore, about other parts of the Isles and the history and the culture and all that. And you see a bunch of people that was saying Karnak at it, you know, that location. But also it goes further than that because in the underpinnings of it we've had to think through a lot more. Like on the center point we were just running as fast as we could. It's like Raphael, Paul, Antonio and I and the team and Dion and Austin were just running as fast as we could. Thinking things through and jotting them down and checking them briefly against things that we had said 6 months before or whatever, and trying to build a word document, you know, as we went. But by the time we did the DLC, we were like, wait a second, what was Granny Rag's original name, and what was her husband's name, and where they lived, and where they from, because now we don't want to contradict that, you know, and so continuity and just felt like really labyrinthine after a while. But if you care about it, you document it and you work your way through it. And of course, we make mistakes every now and then. But the calendar is incorrect. But yeah, it's one of the fun parts.
So what does that look like? Is it like an internal wiki, or what does the lore Bible for Dishonored actually look like?
And it's funny because it's all scattered out backwards in my head, Session's head. At the beginning of the project, I found this app that's like a calendar app that you can just smooth scroll. It's like a long vertical page where you can just like put a month in and something going on, and the idea it's like a timeline software or something, right? And so the idea behind it is like if you're doing a timeline for whatever reason, you know, like a timeline of your life.
Dishonored 2 is only in Dunwall and Termonos, because of all those locations there.
Well, and the Void, but yeah, for sure you started Dunwall and you traveled to
Alright, Tonamakis has a question more about how you transition between missions. In the previous game, you either travel with Samuel on his boat between locations or transition through loading screen doors. Is this the same for Dishonored 2, or are you guys doing something a little different?
It's largely a similar approach. When we talked to you guys, we talked about the Dreadful Whale. And that's the player's base of operations between missions. And there's a skiff that the captain of the boat is named Megan Foster, and she takes you on the skiff between missions.
Federico Pastressa says, I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on players not exploring the entire possibility of space by Dishonored's game system. Do you see that as a design problem? Say, like, how can we push the player to think of this interaction? And if this is the